What you see on the screen is the top 100 games on Steam. This is a Makeover Monday project, 2025, week 3. This video will take you through the build along process. But before we get into the nitty-gritties, let's understand what's happening here. When I select any of the sections here, it highlights all the 41 games over a scatter plot. Each of these differently colored sections are divided by price. I have under $10, 20 in an increment of 10. Last bit of making this accessible and adding some context is the information as I select on it. Let's first understand the data. We have name, price is a non-numerical string type, and current players give me the number of players. I've created a calculated field called cost. It splits the price using the delimiter, wraps it in a float, and converts it into a numerical value. If the value is null, it plugs in a 0. I've created a cost bin from the cost. The size of the bin is 10. Once I bring in the cost bin, I can see everything that was under 10 is grouped as under 10 pound, everything under 20, so on and so forth. First, I've created these two parameters. Bandwidth, it's a float, and I've put in 12. Second parameter that I need is the scaffold scaling factor. That is also a float type parameter, and I've used current value 14. To create a violin plot, I have to use a template. A violin chart, a spreadsheet with only one column called scaffold values, whose values go from 1 all the way to 99. And I've brought in that same Excel that I just showed you, added it as an additional data source, and created a relationship. That relationship with the Steam data source, I'm using a calculated field where I'm plugging in the value, edit calculation 1 equal to 1. Let's also understand the core concept behind a violin chart. If I look at my data, I can see my cost bin. If I plot it as columns, so this is the shape, the number of games that is essentially driving the violin chart. There are 41 games here, there are 20 games under 20. To come up with this shape and to spread it across, we need two calculations. One is the kernel, which determines the curvature, and the distributed scaffold, which goes on the x-axis and decides the range of the chart. I'm going to create this distributed scaffold values calculate field. If you need a copy of this calculation, let me know in the comments or DM me and I will share you the details. That is one. The other formula that we need is the kernel. This curve that you see is determined by the kernel. The contours are a factor of the bandwidth, the parameter bandwidth. Formula kernel creates this exponential curve based on the difference between the distributed scaffold value and the cost. The last bit is the is free. I'm checking to see if my price contains the word free for everything free to play. Let's create the violin plot. I'm going to right click and drag the distributed scaffold value and drop it on columns for the x-axis and drag the kernel into rows. Choose area chart, hold the control key down and drag the sum kernel, put a minus sign in front of it, right click, dual axis, synchronize axis, remove the measure names from the color, throw in the cost bin into the color, bring the cost bin to the text, and right click, drag the name into text and choose count distinct. Now clean it up. Uncheck include from tooltip, right click, remove include from tooltip, hide the headers, clean up the grid lines, clean up the zero lines. The scatter plot is rather easy to do. I've taken the max of the current players. The farthest point shows the most played game. And then I've used this random function to jitter my chart. Made sure that my dashboard actions are working fine. I have a highlight function. When I select a cost bin, highlight action enables me to highlight the data points based on the choices of the cost bin. A URL action ensures that it opens the store for any of the games selected. So if I were to click on this, it will open a browser window and take me to Path of Exile. I used annotation, right click, and say annotate, point. The instruction piece will come as a separate recording because that is a good skill to have. Hope this was helpful. Thanks.